Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we are continuing with our 3 Rideamatics project and specifically the engine transplant on our orange 62 Rideamatic, and we've done a few bits off camera before this video in preparation. Since the last video, we have cleaned up the top of the block here, as you can see, and we've removed 2 of the studs, leaving just this one, and we've put it in the correct position for holding the grille onto the front of the tractor, because these are mounted on the top of the engine. We also took the valves out, kind of lapped the seats and adjusted them to have the right valve gaps and everything like that. We put new points on here, put the points cover back on, and started doing some of the wiring for the battery ignition, mainly because we have to do this before the engine goes into the tractor, because if you come around here, you can see that all of this Versamatic stuff is in the way of the points here, and that would have just been 10 times more difficult to do it once we chuck this new engine onto the chassis. But we've done a few other things. We've cleaned up the head and skimmed it, as you can see. And carburetor, we did try putting this in our ultrasonic cleaner, but it broke. And then our replacement ultrasonic cleaner also broke. So we're not ready to put that onto the engine yet, because we want to actually clean it properly before we do that and set it to factory settings, that kind of stuff. And we're not going to leave that kind of half done, so we won't have a running engine in the tractor today, because obviously the carburetor won't be on it. We're going to get as far as we can with this today, and there's some things we want to do to this before it goes on, and more importantly there's a few things we want to do to the old engine before we take it off the chassis. Before we get started today, we have a package from America, and in here are some parts, some of which are for these 3 projects in here, so we'll kind of quickly go through them. Now, we got some parts at the same time as one of our other Bolens friends in the UK, Andrew, so we managed to split the shipping, thankfully. And if anyone's ever shipped stuff from America to England, you'll know it's quite expensive. But to go through the parts, here we have an engine pulley for the electric start, which will be for this 61 Rideamatic, which means we now have all the parts we need to kind of reassemble the engine on this and work out what's wrong with it, if anything. But that will be obviously after we've finished this Rideamatic. Put that to one side. That's good that we have everything for that now. Here we have an electric start guard for this side of the engine, which we're undecided whether it will be going on this 62 or the orange one. We'll decide that at a later date. The green 61 is actually the only Rideamatic we have with that guard. And we also got the bracket to mount that. However, we have this bracket on both of our tractors, but it's always good to have spare parts in stock. We also have a gearbox dipstick here, which will be going on the green 61, because as you may remember, the dipstick on this has a grease nipple threaded into it, which means the breather and stuff doesn't actually work properly. So this will be going on there to replace that. We've also bought 2 of these, which are the Rideamatic control knobs. One of these will be used on this 62 for the PTO engagement lever, and the other one will actually be used on another Rideamatic, which is our Parts 60, which things have developed with that, and we think we might even be able to make it into a viable tractor, but more about that in future. And we do actually have a part for that, which is a reversing disc for the Versamatic, which is actually in exceptional condition, I would say. But yeah, there'll be more updates about that tractor in future and our plans for it. Those are all the parts that we've got, so thank you to Barry for sending over all of those parts, and it means that these projects are a bit more complete. Back to the 62 now, and we'll just take the grill off because that is just in the way now. And while this old engine is on here, we're going to take the engine pulley and this bracket off. Both of these will need to be transferred over to the other engine, but we're going to do this while it's mounted on the tractor, mainly because of the engine pulley, so that we have it kind of mounted down while we try and pull her off, so it's kind of anchored and it gives a relatively nice vantage point to work from at this level. Now this has the deck pulley on the side of it, which will need to come off before we try and pull the rest of the pulley off, because we can't actually get to the crankshaft currently, and our pullers work from pushing on the crankshaft and then pulling around the back. So we have the impact driver here, and we'll see how easily this comes undone. Easy enough by the looks of it. And it should be, really, because for the last few weeks we've been spraying everything on this engine pulley with releasing agent. Let's see if this just comes off without needing to hit it or anything. Because we expected it to be seized up, and we didn't want to come across any major problems while we were doing this. It's nearly there. There we are. So that's the deck pulley off there. Some nice original paint on there, and actually on the engine pulley itself. That's quite good. Now onto the grub screws. There's 4 of them, and as I said before, we've been putting releasing agent on them for a number of weeks before doing this. So that one at least came undone relatively easily. See if the rest follow suit. Yep. Definitely glad we did this releasing agent stuff beforehand, because we've had too many times where we've tried to take engine pulleys off of things and they just haven't wanted to move. But obviously pulling it off the shaft might be a different story. And last one now. Right, now what we need to do is get our puller out and use the impact just to whip this off. We've taken the bracket off the engine now, and that is down here. We're transferring that over to the other engine anyway, so it had to come off, plus that gave us access to get the puller behind the pulley rather than pulling it on one of these bits here. That's where we would prefer to pull it from. Now normally we would do some measurements about where the pulley is on the crank. However, if you look, it's not actually very well lined up with the other Versamatic bits, so when it comes to lining this pulley up on our new engine, we're probably just going to kind of do it off of our own measurements when we dump that engine in, and maybe use our other Rideamatics for reference as well. So, time to pull this off now. We'll see how well this goes. Hopefully it'll be just as smooth as the other bits that came off easily. That may actually be the easiest I've ever had an engine pulley come off, I think. Don't think I've ever seen one slide off that smoothly before, and we hadn't even touched that to loosen it or anything. Just slid straight off. You can see all the releasing agent, or some of the releasing agent, still on the shaft there, so that clearly made the difference, and we'll probably have to take this Woodruff key over to the new engine, I think. I'm not sure whether that's got one or not. Now the only bit left to take from this engine is the flywheel, but that's loose anyway, so that's just a case of taking it off. But this engine can now be removed from the tractor. We've just quickly pulled that flywheel off again, and that is all of the bits set out that we're going to be putting on the new engine when we mount it in here, and this engine is now ready to come out. Now in future we would like to rebuild this engine. All it needs really is a decent crankshaft on it, then we'd probably get it rebored and some other things machined and stuff like that to make it perfect. But the ignition system we found was very good, and it's got proper Bendix coil on there, which is the company that made the original coils, and this is the only one that we found made by Bendix where it hasn't kind of cracked and stopped working. So it'd be good to get this back into use, but for now obviously we are switching the engines, and usually I'd rope in my cameraman to lift this out, but I'm all grown up now, so I'm going to do it for once. So just take this over to the workbench and switch in our new one. Fits like a glove for now. We've put the engine bolts in now. The back two have been tightened up. We've left these front two without nuts on at the minute, because that is the other mounting point for the grill is under here, so there's no point putting those on yet until that is fixed on there. We've also put the engine pulley onto here, and we've done up almost all of the grub screws. We've got this one left to do, I think. And we've pretty much lined it up with the first Rideamatic pulley, we think. But we've also cleaned up this pulley, ready to put a belt on it, and then we can put the belts from the Rideamatic pulley down on there as well. That's nice and tight. Now, next thing I'm going to fit is this bracket here, because once you start putting belts on and stuff, this just becomes 10 times more complicated. So I'm just going to use an extension to help me do this. We did run a tap through these threads to make sure they were clean, and just to make it easier to thread these bits in. And this is a good thing about using a very similar spec engine. Obviously, if we were using something that was different to switch into this tractor, none of these bits would fit or line up or anything like that. So it would just be a whole load of headaches that we don't have to deal with, thankfully, by doing it this way. Wind these in quickly. There does seem to be a bit of movement in there, so I might have to undo that at some point in future if that needs a tiny bit of adjustment, but we'll get to that when we come to it. For now, that is nice and tight on there, and the next thing to go on after that would be the deck pulley again, or the deck kind of engagement pulley. This is going to be quite difficult to line up, because obviously I've got to get that circle part into the hole and also line up all of the bolt holes. So let's see how this goes. I think that's actually gone on there, so we'll see if these thread in or not. Oh, there we are. That first one's in. Second one's in too. If I can get the third one in, then happy days. Yeah, that was way easier than I imagined it. I thought that was going to be quite difficult to line up, but never mind. I might need my cameraman in a second just to kind of hold the crankshaft while I tighten these all the way up, and then we can call that done. The next thing we're going to do is put some belts on. Now we've got 3 new belts for this. This one obviously isn't for this side, it's way too thin. This is for the electric start, so I will just dangle that off the generator for now, and we'll come back to that side in a bit. But we have a 29-inch one and a 35. Now the 29-inch one I'll do first because that goes between the engine and this first Ultasonic pulley. So I'll try and squeeze it in under here, around. Now the turnbuckle is already loose from when we installed all of these Ultasonic pulleys, which we got from America. And there we are, that's the first belt in. And now the second one, not sure which will be more challenging here, but we'll see. Put that on the bottom here. What I really need is that to move over a bit, or move down in the Ultasonic, which it kind of is. Yeah, there we are. Perfect, thank you. And now hopefully that will stand a better chance of seating in there. We have the belts on now. They might need a bit of an adjustment later, but for now they are on. And we're going to move on to the flywheel. Now, as we've previously mentioned in videos on this project, we're converting this tractor to battery ignition because the ignition module that was on this engine didn't really work, the magneto system, which means we can use this flywheel off the old engine, which doesn't have a magnet in it, and we've already removed the coil and stuff from on here. So this can go straight on here now. And the other plus side of using this flywheel is that it's got the mounting points for the proper pulley on there, so we can keep this electric start relatively easily. But we've got a new spring washer to go on there, and put the nut back on here. And just wind this in. Now moving on to putting the head back on, and as you can see we've got the new head gasket there. So I'll try and lower this down onto it and see if I can line up the holes relatively well. There we are. I'm going to just put this screwdriver through here because that hole goes all the way through. Might as well use it to line everything up, and we put some anti-seizing compound, or copper slip is what we use, on all of these bolts to make sure that they won't seize or anything like that in future. And we've been through all of the threads with a tap along all of the bolts with a die to make sure that the threads are as clean as possible now. And obviously I'm doing these up by hand. Then after this, we're going to need to set them to the right torque setting, which is 15 to 20 foot-pounds of torque. So I will just quickly wind these up to kind of hand tightness. Then we'll need to set up a torque wrench. Originally this engine did have 3 studs on it, but as we said earlier, it's been reduced to just 1 now, so that makes the torquing a bit simpler, I think. That one can come out now. And put this in its place. Got the torque wrench set up now to 15 pound-feet of torque, and the order that I have to do this in is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now I've told you the order. If I do it the wrong order, shout at me in the comments. But we're going to start off by doing all of them to 15 to start with, and then we'll reset the torque wrench to 20, which the manual says is kind of the upper bound of what you want to do for a final torque. I think that's 3. And here for 4. Five. I think I got that right. That should be all of them for the first torque. We've stuffed a spark plug in there now, since we've torqued up all of the bolts to 20, and that will just stop any dust or dirt or anything getting in there. Next thing we're going to try to do is put some cowling on this, and the tin work comes in 4 pieces. The main part here, then 3 other bits kind of go around the block and the head to aid the air cooling. Now these are from the original engine, and the main issue that comes with that will be this main cowling part, because it is ever so slightly not the right shape. So we're going to see if we can make this work quickly, and we'll come back to you in a minute, either with this mounted up nicely or hopefully with a solution of what else to do. Well, as you might be able to tell, this hasn't fully gone to plan. This is the K161 bit of cowling that we were trying to fit. However, it is ever so slightly too small. Now, if I actually compare these with the taper that's on the K181 cowling, I can actually push this over it. Obviously, that's enlarging it. That just shows how close they are in size. But the bottom bit here is just too small for this to actually work on the K181 kind of backing plate and mounting points. So we have just quickly bolted the K181 cowling on there for now. Both of these things pose some issues. Now, in theory, what we could do with this is enlarge this whole kind of bottom part to make it fit. However, we're less keen to do that because that would mean that it wouldn't fit very well on the original engine, and the goal is eventually to put that original engine back together, get it machined, and then maybe into this tractor or another one. So we don't want to modify this too extensively. Then we come to the problems with the K181 cowling, which is why we didn't just go with this in the first place. It's got this lip around it, which means that the pulley, which I have here, can't actually sit onto the mounting points. As you can see, there's a lip there. However, the thickness of the lip on the cowling is too much for that to actually screw onto the flywheel. Also, you might have noticed that the gap between the cowling and these kind of notches on the flywheel is too small as well. So if I hold this up to here, you can see how much that hole needs to be enlarged by, if I just grab the torch. So that needs to be enlarged with the lip cut off, and we need to do that without it looking absolutely awful, otherwise there's no point in doing it really. So that's how we can make this one work. Obviously that is quite a bit of work, and we need to consider how we want to go about this. Now, upon discovering that they are slightly different sizes, we thought we might as well check how the grill fits with the side of the engine here, because on a 62 Rideamatic it kind of molds around the side of the engine. And actually that fitted just fine. However, when we were kind of putting this on, we realised that this bottom bracket part that's mounted to the cast grille is bent in about every single possible way. So that's unfortunate. That needs some work doing to it. And someone appears to put, well, they put this bolt in it, which is Whitworth. It has, well, it fits a 1/4 Whitworth not socket, spanner. So we've replaced it with what should be in there, which is a 5/16 UNC bolt. And if someone's familiar with these kind of fixings and conversions between them, they'll probably be saying that the threads per inch is pretty similar. It must be, because putting this Whitworth bolt into the grille didn't actually damage the threads in there, thankfully. But that's switched back over now, so that is as it should be. So at least one good thing came from discovering all of these problems. But what we now need to do is go away and do some head scratching about how we want to deal with these issues. So that is pretty much the end for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.